The wounded dragon. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed his wheat fields. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills of his farm in rural Montana. After 20 years of military service, he had found peace in this quiet corner of the world. The only sounds were the gentle rustling of grain in the breeze and the distant lowing of his cattle. He was checking the irrigation system when he heard it. A sound like thunder, but wrong somehow. The sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. Marcus looked up, shielding his eyes against the bright morning light. A dark shape streaked across the blue expanse, trailing smoke and sparks. Whatever it was coming down fast. The object crashed into his back 40 with a tremendous roar that shook the ground beneath his feet. Marcus felt his military instincts kick in. He grabbed his binoculars from the truck and studied the crash site. Smoke billowed up from a crater in his cornfield, and he could see twisted metal glinting in the sunlight. His first thought was that it might be a military aircraft, maybe a test flight gone wrong from one of the bases further east. Marcus grabbed his first aid kit and climbed into his pickup truck. As he drove toward the crash site, his mind raced through possibilities. Pilot injury, fuel leak, potential explosion, all the things his army training had taught him to consider. The crater was massive, easily 30 feet across and 10 feet deep. But as Marcus approached the edge, his breath caught in his throat. This wasn't any aircraft he had ever seen. The wreckage was made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Strange symbols covered the hull, and the overall design was utterly alien. Sleek curves and organic shapes that no human engineer would create. Then he heard the sound, a low, pained rumble that seemed to vibrate through his chest. Something was alive in there. Marcus carefully made his way down into the crater, his boots slipping on the loose earth. The sound grew louder as he approached the wreckage. Through a tear in the hull, he could see movement. Something large and dark shifted within the shadows of the crashed vessel. "Hello?" Marcus called out, feeling foolish but not knowing what else to do. "Is anyone hurt in there?" The movement stopped. Then, slowly, a head emerged from the opening in the hull. Marcus nearly fell backward in shock. It was a dragon, not the fairy tale kind with scales and wings, but something far more magnificent and terrible. The creature's head was the size of a small car, covered in what looked like living obsidian that reflected the morning light in rainbow patterns. Its eyes were enormous, a deep amber color flecked with gold. As it looked at Marcus, he saw intelligence there, ancient, profound, and definitely not human. The dragon tried to pull itself free from the wreckage, but Marcus could see it was badly injured. One of its legs was trapped under a beam of twisted metal, and a dark liquid that might have been blood seeped from several wounds along its flank. The creature made that rumbling sound again, and Marcus realized it was in terrible pain. Every instinct told him to run. This was beyond anything he could understand or handle, but Marcus had been a medic in the army before he became a farmer. He had taken an oath once, long ago, to help the wounded regardless of who they were. Looking at this magnificent, suffering creature, he found that oath still meant something. "Easy there, big guy," Marcus said softly, the same tone he had used with injured soldiers and frightened animals. "I'm going to try to help you." The dragon's massive head turned toward him, those golden eyes studying him with an intensity that made Marcus feel exposed, as if every thought in his head was being read and catalogued. Then, incredibly, the creature seemed to relax slightly. Marcus ran back to his truck and returned with a toolbox and a heavy-duty car jack. The beam pinning the dragon's leg was made of the same strange metal as the ship, but it had been twisted and weakened in the crash. Working carefully, Marcus positioned the jack and began to lift. The dragon watched his every move but remained still, as if it understood what Marcus was trying to do. When the beam lifted enough to free the trapped limb, the creature carefully extracted its leg. Marcus could see it was broken. The strange obsidian hide split to reveal something that might have been bone beneath. "That's got to hurt," Marcus murmured. He had no idea how to treat an injured dragon, but he knew the basics of trauma care. The first priority was always to stop the bleeding. He returned to his truck again, this time bringing back clean towels, water, and his first aid supplies. The dragon allowed him to approach, though Marcus could sense the effort it took for the creature to remain still. These beings were clearly predators of some kind. He could see the intelligence of a hunter in those golden eyes, along with something else. Gratitude, perhaps. Marcus cleaned the wounds as best he could with clean water and applied pressure bandages where the bleeding was worst. The dragon's hide was unlike anything he had ever encountered, warm to the touch but incredibly tough. His makeshift bandages looked absurdly small against the creature's massive frame, but they seemed to help. The broken leg was beyond his ability to treat properly, but Marcus fashioned a crude splint using lumber from his truck and rope. Throughout the entire process, the dragon remained perfectly still, though Marcus could see the pain in its eyes. Once, when he was working on a particularly deep wound, the creature made a soft sound that reminded him of a cat's purr. He chose to interpret it as approval. By the time he finished, the sun was high overhead. Marcus sat back on his heels, exhausted and covered in the dragon's strange blood, which had dried to a metallic sheen on his hands and clothes. The creature looked better. The bleeding had stopped, and the splint would keep the broken leg stable. "There," Marcus said, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "That should help until you can get proper medical attention, though I have no idea where you're going to find a dragon doctor." The creature regarded him for a long moment, then slowly lowered its massive head until it was resting on the ground near Marcus's feet. The gesture felt somehow formal, like a bow or a salute. Marcus reached out hesitantly and touched the warm obsidian hide between the dragon's eyes. "You're welcome," he said simply. The dragon's eyes drifted closed, and its breathing became slow and regular. Exhausted from pain and trauma, it had fallen asleep. Marcus stood up, his back aching from the hours of careful work. He looked around at the crater, the wreckage, and the sleeping alien creature, and wondered what the hell he was supposed to do next. His first instinct was to call the authorities. This was clearly a first contact situation, something way above his pay grade. But something held him back. Maybe it was the trust the dragon had shown him, or the memory of those intelligent, grateful eyes. The government would want to study this creature, dissect its ship, learn its secrets. Marcus had seen enough of military efficiency during his service to know how that would go. Instead, he made a different choice. He drove back to his house and returned with camping equipment, food, and water. If the dragon was going to recover here, on his land, then Marcus was going to make sure it was protected while it healed. He set up his tent at the edge of the crater and settled in to wait. As the sun began to set, painting the Montana sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Marcus sat beside the sleeping dragon and tried to wrap his mind around what had happened to his quiet, ordinary life. The dragon slept through the night, its breathing deep and steady. Marcus dozed fitfully in his tent, waking several times to check on his unusual patient. Each time those golden eyes would open briefly, focus on him, then drift closed again. The creature seemed to understand that it was safe. Dawn brought new challenges. The dragon was awake when Marcus emerged from his tent, and it was clearly hungry. The creature's stomach made rumbling sounds that echoed across the crater, and its eyes followed Marcus's every movement with predatory intensity. "What do you eat?" Marcus asked, then felt foolish for talking to a creature that clearly couldn't understand English. But the dragon tilted its head thoughtfully, then made a series of complex sounds, not quite roars, more like a sophisticated language of rumbles, clicks, and harmonic tones. Marcus had no idea what it was trying to communicate, but the message was clear enough. The dragon was hungry, and it was looking to him for help. After some experimentation, Marcus discovered that the dragon would eat raw beef, though it required massive quantities. He drove to town and bought every steak he could afford, spinning a story about a church barbecue to explain the enormous purchase. The dragon consumed nearly 50 pounds of meat in one sitting, then looked hopefully at Marcus for more. "That's it for today," Marcus told the creature firmly. "I'm not made of money." The dragon seemed to understand his tone, if not his words. It settled back down in the crater, but its eyes remained alert, scanning the sky. Marcus noticed this behavior and felt a chill run down his spine. The dragon was watching for something, waiting for something. That evening, as Marcus prepared another massive meal for his unexpected guest, he noticed the dragon becoming increasingly agitated. It kept looking up at the darkening sky, making soft sounds that might have been calls or signals. Its body language had changed, too. Where before it had been relaxed despite its injuries, now it seemed tense, expectant. "What is it?" Marcus asked, following the dragon's gaze upward. The first stars were beginning to appear in the clear Montana sky, but he saw nothing unusual. The dragon made a complex series of sounds, then did something that made Marcus's blood run cold. It lifted one of its good legs and pointed directly at him, then pointed at the sky, then back at him. The message was unmistakable. "They're coming, and they're coming for you." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "Who's coming?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. The dragon's response was to struggle to its feet despite its injuries. It limped to the edge of the crater and let out a sound Marcus had never heard before, a deep, resonant call that seemed to shake the very air around them. The sound carried for miles across the empty farmland, a signal or warning broadcast to anyone listening. Then the dragon turned back to Marcus, its golden eyes filled with what looked unmistakably like concern. It approached him slowly, carefully, then gently nudged him with its massive head toward his house. "You want me to hide?" Marcus realized. The dragon's meaning was clear. Whatever was coming, it would be dangerous for him. The creature he had saved was trying to return the favor, but Marcus Chen had spent 20 years in the army. He had never run from a fight, and he wasn't about to start now. Whatever was coming, he would face it here, beside the dragon he had helped. He shook his head firmly. "I'm staying," he told the creature. "We'll face this together." The dragon studied him for a long moment, then made a sound that might have been approval. It settled down beside Marcus's tent, positioning itself between him and the sky. Together, they waited for whatever was coming to arrive. As the night deepened and the stars grew brighter, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. 24 hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether the irrigation system would hold out through the summer. Now he was apparently preparing to meet an alien delegation, with only an injured dragon and his own stubborn determination for protection. But as he sat in the darkness beside his unlikely companion, listening to its steady breathing and watching the vast sky above, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since leaving the military. He felt like he was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, he was a farmer who had helped a wounded creature, and that would have to be enough. The arrival. Marcus woke to a sound he felt in his bones rather than heard with his ears, a deep thrumming that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. The dragon beside him was already alert, its massive head raised toward the pre-dawn sky. The creature's entire body was tense, coiled like a spring ready to release. The farmer rolled out of his sleeping bag and reached for his binoculars, scanning the horizon. At first, he saw nothing but the familiar landscape of his Montana ranch. Then, as the thrumming grew stronger, he spotted them. 3 objects descended from the cloud cover like falling stars, but their movement was too controlled, too purposeful to be natural. They were ships, sleek vessels that shared the same organic design as the crashed craft in his crater. As they approached, Marcus could see they were much larger than the dragon's ship, each one easily the size of a city block. The lead ship touched down in his largest pasture, settling onto the grass with surprising gentleness for something so massive. The other two vessels flanked it, creating a triangle formation that encompassed nearly his entire property. Up close, Marcus could see that their hulls were covered in the same shifting patterns as the dragon's hide, surfaces that seemed to ripple and flow like liquid metal in the morning light. The dragon beside him struggled to its feet despite its injuries, favoring the splinted leg. It made a series of complex vocalizations, and to Marcus's amazement, responses came from the ships, harmonious sounds that carried across the distance like whale songs. The dragon and the ships were communicating. "Well," Marcus said quietly, adjusting his baseball cap, "I guess we're about to have visitors." The dragon turned to look at him, its golden eyes filled with what Marcus could only interpret as warning. Then it did something that made his breath catch in his throat. The creature very deliberately positioned itself between Marcus and the ships, despite being barely able to stand on its injured leg. Panels opened on the nearest vessel with a sound like rushing water, and figures began to emerge. Marcus raised his binoculars and felt his world shift once again. They looked like the dragon in some ways, the same obsidian hide that reflected light in rainbow patterns, the same general body structure. But these beings walked upright on two legs, with arms that ended in hands containing far too many fingers. They were tall, at least 8 feet each, and they moved with a fluid grace that made Marcus think of dancers or predators. Their faces were angular and alien, dominated by those same golden eyes that seemed to see too much. There were dozens of them emerging from each ship, and they were armed. The weapons they carried were unlike anything Marcus had seen, but their purpose was unmistakable. Energy hummed around them in visible waves, and the air itself seemed to bend and twist where they pointed. The beings formed ordered ranks as they approached across his pasture, their movements perfectly synchronized. At their head walked a figure that was clearly their leader, taller than the others, with hide that held deeper, more complex patterns of color. When this being spoke, its voice carried easily across the distance, filled with harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. The dragon responded, its own voice strained but strong. Marcus couldn't understand the conversation, but he could hear the emotion in it. The dragon was arguing, pleading, explaining. The leader's responses grew increasingly sharp and demanding. Finally, the dragon fell silent. The alien leader's gaze fixed on Marcus across the field, and the farmer felt as if he were being weighed and measured by something vast and incomprehensible. Then the leader made a gesture, and the armed beings began to advance. Marcus stood up slowly, his hands visible and empty. 20 years of military experience told him he was about to die. These beings could have vaporized him from orbit if they'd wanted to, but instead they were coming to face him personally. That suggested either honor or curiosity, and he hoped he was about to find out which. The dragon made a desperate sound and tried to step forward, but its injuries made it stumble. Marcus reached out instinctively to steady the massive creature, his hand finding purchase on the warm obsidian hide. The touch seemed to calm the dragon, but the approaching aliens stopped dead in their tracks. The leader barked something that was clearly a command, and the weapons that had been lowering suddenly snapped back up, all pointed directly at Marcus. But they didn't fire. Instead, the leader approached alone, leaving its warriors behind. As the being drew closer, Marcus could see details that made his skin crawl. The alien's face was a mixture of reptilian and insectoid features, with golden eyes that held depths of intelligence that seemed almost infinite. When it spoke, Marcus felt the words as much as heard them. "Human," the being said in perfect, unaccented English. "You have interfered with our property." Marcus blinked in surprise. Not only could this creature speak his language, but it had somehow learned it well enough to communicate complex ideas. "Your property?" he managed to say, his voice steadier than he felt. The alien gestured toward the dragon. "This is our scout, our advance agent. It was damaged in the performance of its duties and should have returned to us immediately for repair." The being's golden eyes fixed on Marcus with uncomfortable intensity. "Instead, we find it here, tended by a primitive being on a backwater world. This requires explanation." Marcus felt a flash of anger at being called primitive, but he kept his voice level. "Your scout was hurt. I helped it. Where I come from, that's what you do when someone's injured." "Where you come from," the alien repeated, and there was something like amusement in its harmonious voice. "And where you come from, do you often aid invaders who are scouting your world for conquest?" The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked at the dragon, who couldn't meet his eyes. "Conquest. This world has been marked for integration into our empire," the alien leader explained with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "Our scout was conducting final surveys when its ship malfunctioned. The integration will proceed as planned, but first, we must deal with the complication you represent." Marcus felt his throat go dry. "What kind of complication?" "You have seen our technology. You know of our existence. By the laws that govern our expansion, this knowledge makes you a security risk that must be eliminated." The alien's expression didn't change as it pronounced his death sentence. "However, our scout has made certain representations on your behalf." The dragon made a soft sound, and Marcus understood. The creature had been arguing for his life. "Your scout seems to believe I deserve some consideration," Marcus said carefully. "Indeed." The alien leader stepped closer, studying Marcus like a specimen under a microscope. "It claims that you showed mercy to an enemy, provided aid without thought of reward, and demonstrated what it calls honorable behavior. These are concepts that translate poorly from your language to ours, but the meaning is intriguing." Marcus felt a spark of hope. "So you're going to let me live?" "That remains to be determined." The alien gestured, and two of its warriors approached, weapons still at the ready. "You will be brought aboard our vessel for examination. If you are found to be as worthy as our scout claims, you may yet see another sunrise. If not..." The creature's meaning was clear enough. The dragon struggled to its feet again, making urgent sounds. The alien leader responded sharply, clearly ordering it to remain where it was. But the dragon limped forward anyway, positioning itself once again between Marcus and the aliens. The leader's expression shifted to what might have been surprise. "Fascinating. Our scout appears to have developed what you might call an emotional attachment to you. This is highly irregular behavior for our species." "Maybe that should tell you something," Marcus said, surprised by his own boldness. The alien's golden eyes narrowed. "Elaborate." Marcus took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Your scout spent time with me. It saw how I live, how I treat others. Maybe it learned something about humans that doesn't match what you expected to find." "And what might that be?" "That we're not as primitive as you think. That we have things worth preserving." Marcus gestured around at his farm, the rolling hills, the vast sky above. "Maybe there's another way to do this that doesn't involve conquest." The alien leader was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with those unsettling golden eyes. Finally, it spoke. "These are dangerous words, human. They suggest alternatives to policies that have guided our empire for millennia. Do you understand what you are proposing?" "I'm proposing that you take a closer look before you make irreversible decisions," Marcus replied. "Your scout was hurt, and I helped it heal. That's the kind of people we are, at least the ones worth knowing. Maybe that's worth something to you." The dragon made a complex series of sounds, clearly supporting Marcus's words. Other dragons emerged from the ships, scientists or officials of some kind, judging by their different equipment and bearing. They approached the crater where the dragon's ship still lay partially buried, examining the wreckage with obvious professional interest. But Marcus noticed something else. Some of these beings were looking at him with curiosity rather than hostility. His interaction with their scout had clearly made an impression that went beyond just one individual. The leader seemed to notice this too. It made a series of gestures, and the warriors lowered their weapons slightly. "You present us with an unusual situation, human. Our scout's testimony suggests that first contact protocols may need to be adjusted for this world." First contact protocols? The standard procedure for integrating primitive civilizations into our empire, the alien explained. It typically involves demonstration of superior force, elimination of resistance, and gradual assimilation of useful population elements. Marcus felt sick. "And that's what you were planning for Earth?" "It is what we plan for all worlds that lack the technology to meaningfully resist us," the alien said matter-of-factly. "However, our scout's report suggests that your species may possess other qualities that merit consideration." "Such as?" The alien gestured toward the dragon. "The capacity for mercy toward an enemy. The willingness to provide aid without expectation of reward. What our scout describes as compassion and honor. These are rare traits among the species we have encountered." Marcus looked at the dragon, who had settled down but was still watching the proceedings with obvious concern. "Your scout is pretty remarkable, too. It could have killed me easily, but it chose to trust me instead." "Yes." The alien leader's expression became thoughtful. "This is what creates our dilemma. If your species truly possesses these qualities in significant numbers, then standard integration protocols may not be appropriate. But if this is merely an isolated case..." "It's not isolated," Marcus said firmly. "There are billions of us down there, and most of us would have done exactly what I did if they'd found your scout injured." "That remains to be verified," the alien replied. "Which brings us to our decision. You will accompany us as we conduct a more thorough assessment of your species. Your insights will help us determine the appropriate course of action for this world." Marcus felt his heart racing. "And if you decide we're not worth preserving, then standard protocols will resume, and your species will be integrated into our empire through more conventional means." The alien's tone remained conversational, as if discussing agricultural techniques rather than the fate of humanity. "And if you decide we are worth preserving, then we will need to develop new protocols entirely. Your species would become the first to be offered partnership rather than assimilation." The alien paused, studying Marcus carefully. This would be unprecedented in the history of our empire. The political implications alone would be staggering. Marcus looked around at the alien ships, the warriors, the vast demonstration of power arrayed on his simple farm. Then he looked at the dragon, who was watching him with those intelligent golden eyes. In them, he saw hope and concern, and something that might have been friendship. "I'll go with you," he said finally, "but I want guarantees. No hostile action against Earth until you've completed your assessment. No taking any more humans without their consent. And I want regular communication with my own people so they know what's happening." The alien leader's expression shifted to what might have been surprise. "You are in no position to make demands, human." "No," Marcus agreed, "but I'm in a position to help you understand us better or to refuse to cooperate entirely. Your call." The dragon made an encouraging sound, clearly supporting Marcus's position. Several of the other aliens had gathered around to observe the confrontation, and Marcus could see various expressions of what might have been admiration or amusement on their angular faces. The leader considered for several long minutes. Finally, it gestured to one of its subordinates, who approached with what looked like a translation device. "Your terms are acceptable? Within reason. You will accompany us for observation and consultation. During this time, no hostile actions will be taken against your world. Communication with your authorities will be permitted under controlled circumstances." Marcus nodded. "And my friend here?" He gestured toward the dragon. "Our scout will also accompany us. Its unique perspectives on your species have proven valuable." The alien's tone suggested this was something of an understatement. As the aliens began preparing for departure, Marcus took a last look around his farm. The wheat was ready for harvest, the cattle would need tending, and there were a dozen other tasks that would go undone while he was away. But none of that mattered now. He was about to embark on the most important journey in human history. The dragon approached him slowly, mindful of its injured leg. When it reached Marcus, it lowered its great head until they were at eye level. For a moment, human and alien regarded each other in perfect understanding. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, knowing the dragon couldn't understand his words, but hoping it would understand his meaning. The dragon's response was to gently touch Marcus's shoulder with its snout, a gesture that felt like both farewell and promise. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As Marcus walked toward the alien ships, he couldn't help but smile. Yesterday, he had been a simple farmer. Today, he was humanity's first ambassador to an alien empire. Tomorrow, he would help determine the fate of his entire species. It wasn't exactly the retirement he had planned, but it would certainly be interesting. The Judgment 6 months had passed since Marcus Chen first stepped aboard an alien vessel, and the experience had changed him in ways he was still discovering. The ship itself was a marvel, corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely in directions that shouldn't exist, rooms that adjusted their size and configuration based on the occupants' needs, and technology so advanced it seemed like magic. But it was the beings themselves that truly amazed him. The species called themselves the HFY, and they were far more complex than their initial threatening appearance had suggested. Marcus had learned to read their subtle expressions, to understand the harmonics in their voices that conveyed emotion and meaning beyond mere words. He had even begun to pick up basic phrases in their language, though his human vocal cords could only approximate their sophisticated sounds. His companion, the dragon he had saved, whose name translated roughly to Seeker of Distant Shores, had become his closest ally and friend. Seeker's injuries had healed completely thanks to advanced HFY medical technology, but the bond between human and alien had only grown stronger. They spent hours in conversation, with Seeker serving as both translator and cultural interpreter. Today, however, was different. Today was Judgment Day. Marcus stood in what the HFY called the Chamber of Convergence, a vast amphitheater aboard their flagship where the ruling council would hear the final reports and make their decision about Earth's fate. Representatives from across their empire had gathered, species from a dozen different worlds, all now part of the HFY Confederation. Some had been conquered, others had negotiated their membership, but all were here to witness something unprecedented. The human was to be the first representative of an uncontacted species to address the High Council directly. Marcus wore the simple clothes he had requested: jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt. He had refused the ornate robes the HFY had offered, insisting that he represent humanity as he truly was, not dressed up in alien finery. Beside him, Seeker stood tall and proud, his obsidian hide gleaming in the chamber's strange light. The council itself was an impressive sight. 12 beings sat on a raised dais, each representing a different aspect of HFY society. There was the war leader, whose hide bore the scars of 1,000 battles, the knowledge keeper surrounded by floating displays showing data from across the empire, the harmony weaver, whose role was to maintain social cohesion among the diverse species under HFY rule, At the center sat the prime speaker, the closest thing the Kethvar had to a supreme leader. This being was ancient even by their standards, with hide that had taken on an almost crystalline quality and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of millennia. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made the very air shimmer. "We have gathered," the prime speaker intoned, "to consider a question that has never before been asked in the history of our empire. Shall a species be granted partnership rather than integration? Shall the humans of Earth be treated as equals rather than subjects?" A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Marcus could see the various species whispering among themselves, some with obvious skepticism, others with apparent curiosity. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If the Council ruled against humanity, the integration would proceed, and billions would die or be enslaved. "The evidence has been presented," the prime speaker continued. "We have observed human settlements, studied their history, analyzed their social structures, and witnessed their capabilities. We have seen both their capacity for violence and their potential for compassion. The question before us is simple. Are they worthy of the unprecedented honor we would bestow?" The war leader spoke first, its voice harsh and challenging. "Honored Council, I have reviewed the military capabilities of the human species. They are formidable fighters, I grant that, but they are also fractured, constantly warring among themselves. Their history is written in blood and conquest. How can we trust a species that cannot even achieve peace among its own kind?" Marcus felt his heart sink, but then the Knowledge Keeper responded. "War leader, your assessment is accurate, but incomplete. Yes, humans have a violent history, but consider the context. They evolved on a world with limited resources and no external threats to unify them. Yet despite this, they have repeatedly shown the ability to transcend their differences when faced with greater challenges. Their response to natural disasters, their cooperation in space exploration, their gradual progress toward global governance, all suggest a species capable of growth." "Growth that came too late," interjected another counselor. "Their world suffers from environmental degradation, resource depletion, and social inequality. They have proven they cannot manage their own planet. Why should we believe they can contribute meaningfully to our empire?" Seeker stepped forward, and Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for his friend's support. "Honored Council, I request permission to speak on behalf of the human I observed." The prime speaker gestured its consent. "You have earned the right, seeker of distant shores. Your testimony carries great weight in these proceedings." Seeker's voice rang out clear and strong. "I was injured, helpless, completely at the mercy of this human. He had every reason to fear me, to see me as a threat. Instead, he chose to help. He spent hours tending my wounds, shared his resources with me, and protected me from potential harm. When my people arrived, he could have betrayed me to save himself. Instead, he stood by me, defended me, risked his life for a being he had known for mere days. A single individual's kindness does not represent an entire species," the war leader countered. "But it does represent their potential," Seeker replied firmly. And in the months that followed, as we studied human society more closely, we found that such kindness is not rare among them. They maintain vast networks dedicated to helping strangers. They risk their lives to save those they do not know. They even extend compassion to other species on their world. This is not the behavior of a primitive or inherently violent race. Marcus watched the debate continue, feeling helpless as beings discussed the fate of his entire species. Representatives from conquered worlds spoke of their own experiences, some bitter about their treatment, others grudgingly admitting that life under Kethvar rule had brought peace and prosperity they had never known. Finally, the prime speaker called for silence. "Human Marcus Chen, you have observed these proceedings in silence. Now, we would hear your voice. What would you say to this council on behalf of your species? Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. Everything he had learned about Kethvar protocols suggested he should be formal, respectful, submissive. Instead, he chose to speak from the heart. Honored council, I'm just a farmer. 6 months ago, my biggest worry was whether it would rain enough for my wheat crop. I never wanted to be here, never asked to speak for all of humanity. But here I am, and I'll do my best to tell you who we really are. He paused, looking around at the assembled beings. We're not perfect. We fight, we make mistakes, we sometimes act out of fear or greed, but we also love, we hope, we dream of something better. When I found Seeker injured in my field, I didn't help him because I thought it would benefit me somehow. I helped him because it was the right thing to do. That's not special, that's just human. Marcus's voice grew stronger as he continued. You talk about our violent history, and you're right. We've done terrible things to each other. But we've also created art that moves the soul, music that brings joy, stories that inspire hope. We've cured diseases, explored the cosmos, and reached out across the void of space, hoping to find others like ourselves. We're a young species, still learning, still growing. Maybe that's exactly what you need in your empire. Not another conquered world, but a partner that can grow alongside you. He gestured toward Seeker. My friend here taught me that the universe is vast and full of wonders I never imagined. But I hope I taught him something too, that even in the face of the unknown, it's possible to choose trust over fear, compassion over conquest. The chamber fell silent. Marcus could see the council members communicating among themselves through subtle gestures and harmonic undertones that were beyond his ability to interpret. The waiting stretched on for what felt like hours. Finally, the prime speaker rose from its seat. This council has reached a decision, though it was not unanimous. The debate was intense, the implications staggering. Never before have we considered offering partnership to an uncontacted species. Never before have we weighed compassion as heavily as military might in our deliberations. Marcus held his breath. However, the prime speaker continued, the evidence is compelling. The human capacity for growth, their potential for cooperation, their demonstrated ability to show mercy even to their enemies. These qualities suggest that they may indeed be worthy of the unprecedented offer we are prepared to make. A wave of excited murmurs swept through the chamber. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. Therefore, this council hereby extends to the human species of Earth an offer of partnership within the Kethvar Confederation. They will retain autonomy over their world and their societies while gaining access to our technology, our trade networks, and our protection. In return, they will contribute their unique perspectives and capabilities to our collective endeavors. The prime speaker's gaze fixed on Marcus. This offer comes with conditions. Humanity must demonstrate its commitment to peace, both among themselves and with their new allies. They must show responsibility in the use of advanced technologies, and they must prove that the compassion you have shown is truly representative of your species as a whole. Marcus found his voice. How long do we have to prove ourselves? As long as it takes, the prime speaker replied. This partnership will begin with a probationary period of 50 Earth years, during which human and Kethvar representatives will work together to integrate your world into our confederation. You, Marcus Chen, will serve as the first human ambassador to our council. Marcus blinked in surprise. Me? But I'm just a farmer. You are the human who showed mercy to an enemy, who chose compassion over fear, who stood before this council and spoke truth without regard for personal consequences, the prime speaker said. These are the qualities we need in an ambassador. Will you accept this responsibility? Marcus looked at Seeker, who nodded encouragingly. He thought of his farm back on Earth, his quiet life that would never be the same. Then he thought of the billions of people whose futures hung in the balance. "I accept," he said. The chamber erupted in sounds that might have been applause, though they were unlike anything human ears had ever heard. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Humanity had just been offered a place among the stars, and somehow, impossibly, he was going to help make it work. As the formal proceedings concluded and the various representatives began to disperse, Seeker approached Marcus with something that might have been a smile on his alien features. "Well, my friend," Seeker said, "it seems our story is just beginning." Marcus looked around at the incredible technology surrounding them, thought of all the wonders and challenges that lay ahead, and grinned. "You know what? I think I'm actually looking forward to it." 3 months later, Marcus stood in a field on Earth, not his own farm, but a specially prepared site where the first permanent human Kethvar embassy was being constructed. The building rose from the ground like something out of a dream, its organic curves and flowing lines a perfect blend of human aesthetic sensibilities and Kethvar engineering principles. Representatives from both species worked side by side, learning from each other, building something new together. There had been skeptics on both sides, of course. Some humans viewed the aliens with suspicion and fear, while some Kethvar remained convinced that humanity was too primitive for true partnership. But progress was being made. The integration hadn't been without its challenges. The revelation that humanity was no longer alone in the universe had sent shockwaves through every aspect of human society. Governments had fallen and reformed, religions had evolved, and entire worldviews had been upended. But humanity had adapted, as it always did. Marcus found himself traveling between worlds now, serving as a bridge between two very different species. He had learned to navigate the complex political structures of the Kethvar Confederation, to understand the subtle cultural differences between their various member species, and to represent humanity's interests with both firmness and diplomacy. But perhaps most importantly, he had maintained his friendship with Seeker, who had chosen to remain on Earth as the first Kethvar permanent ambassador. Together, they had become symbols of what was possible when two species chose cooperation over conquest, understanding over fear. As Marcus watched the sun set over the construction site, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. It had started with a simple act of kindness toward an injured creature in his cornfield. Now, that same kindness was helping to reshape the relationship between two civilizations. Seeker approached across the field, his obsidian hide gleaming in the fading light. "The construction crews report that the embassy will be completed ahead of schedule," he said. "It seems that humans and Kethvar work well together when they share a common goal. Amazing what you can accomplish when you try cooperation instead of conquest," Marcus replied with a grin. "Indeed," Seeker agreed. "Though I must admit, there are still those among my people who believe this experiment will ultimately fail. They point to humanity's history of conflict, your tendency toward tribal thinking, your short lifespans that limit long-term planning." Marcus nodded. "And they're not entirely wrong. We do have those problems. But we also have something else. The ability to change, to grow, to become better than we were. That's what you're betting on, isn't it? Not that we're perfect, but that we can improve." "Precisely." Seeker's golden eyes reflected the last rays of sunlight. "And in the months since our first meeting, you have proven that assessment correct. Your species has embraced this partnership with an enthusiasm that has surprised even our most optimistic projections." Marcus looked around at the bustling construction site, where humans and aliens worked together with increasing ease and familiarity. Children from nearby towns came by after school to watch the alien workers, their initial fear replaced by curiosity and excitement. Kethvar scientists collaborated with human researchers, sharing knowledge that was already leading to breakthroughs in energy, medicine, and transportation. You know, Marcus said thoughtfully, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been the one to find you that day. What if it had been someone less willing to help or more afraid of the unknown? But it was you, Seeker replied simply. And that has made all the difference. The kindness you showed to an injured enemy has quite literally changed the course of history for both our species. Marcus chuckled. No pressure there. Indeed, the pressure is immense, Seeker agreed with what Marcus had learned to recognize as Kethvar humor. But if the past year has taught me anything, it is that humans thrive under pressure. You seem to become more resourceful, more creative, more cooperative when faced with impossible challenges. Lucky for us, Marcus said, because I have a feeling the challenges are just getting started. As if to prove his point, a new ship appeared in the evening sky. One of the regular transports that now carried people and goods between Earth and the Kethvar worlds. Marcus waved up at it, knowing that somewhere aboard were human ambassadors heading out to other planets, Kethvar scholars coming to study Earth culture, and trade representatives working to integrate humanity into the galactic economy. It was a future that would have been unimaginable just a year ago, a future that had begun with a simple choice to help someone in need, regardless of the risk or potential reward. Come on, Marcus said, turning toward the embassy building. We've got work to do. As they walked toward the glowing structure together, human and Kethvar, former enemies turned friends, symbols of hope for both their species, Marcus couldn't help but smile. He might be just a farmer from Montana, but he was a farmer who had helped plant the seeds of a galactic civilization built on cooperation rather than conquest. And those seeds were already beginning to grow.